last week you were kind of like, hey, don't worry, guys. Don't overreact to everything that's going on here. But since then, they've lost 3 more hockey games, Frank. And I'm starting to get to the point where I'm worried that this team might not fix themselves this year.
Yeah, and I guess I would add to that, don't expect some new shiny toy to come in and solve all of their problems. Because you can take a look at my trade targets board. There's 40-some names on there left. Aside from, a superstar addition, which the Oilers don't even really have the assets to do or the cap space, you tell me where's the cavalry coming? Like, they need to figure it out on their own. And I believe whether you're using Evander Kane's LTIR money or not, there is not a true big enough difference maker out there for this team as currently constituted to necessarily lift them out of the malaise that they're in. The solution has to come from within. It just does.
It is 100% on this group to figure it out, because they are not all that different from the team that went to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Do they need a boost via trade? Do they need to do some amount of addition by subtraction? I don't know, but you have a piece up at dailyfaceoff.com about, the still shopping teams in the NHL, and you kind of have Edmonton ranked as right in the middle, from aggressive to more likely to stand pat. You have Jamie Alexiak as an ideal fit. Do you think that's like a realistic expectation for Oilers fans to be like, hey, by Friday, a Jamie Alexiak type defender could be an Oiler?
It's a possibility for sure. That's the type of, I think, ad stylistically that they'd like to make. Can they pull something like that off? I think is a real question. But I do want to add one thing. Like, you said not all that different from last year's team. Like, I think this team is significantly different than the team that went to Game 7. And I don't know that as a marketplace, as a whole, as a hockey community, we've necessarily recognized that like 30% of this team is different than it was last year in Game 7.
I guess coming into the year, though, it was like, okay, you lost Fogle, but Arvidsson should be just as good. You're not going to have Ryan McLeod, but a full season of Adam Henrique should fill that void a little bit. Ceci and Desharnais are out, but you have Ty Emberson, and he seems like an intriguing, kind of project to bring on here. Like, the roster, I just don't think is that much worse, as much as maybe it is 30% different, but I guess getting older is biting them in the ass.
It's that much worse. It truly is.
Okay.
The speed has evaporated. The goal scoring capability has deteriorated. Evan Bouchard has had a worse season than last year. Connor McDavid has had a significantly worse season than last year. So you take some underperforming players relative to the high standard that they've set, then add in the drop-off from the players that we've talked about all season long, and what you end up with is a team where when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs and you attempt to go all the way, you end up winning on the margins. You end up winning by small percentage points. And when you have enough of these things chip away at what you've built, that adds up to something significant. So yeah, I mean, you hit on them, but those are all like legitimate pieces that I think now you look at it and you go, I don't know that we properly appreciated how tough that has been to overcome.
Evander Kane, obviously they're still up in the air what if he's going to play, whatever that may be, but he did have to submit his 16 trade list. Do you think there's any chance he gets moved, or do you think that's just kind of something that won't happen?
I'd be very, very surprised. Not impossible, but this is the situation. Everyone in the league can see that you're trying to move Evander Kane to get yourself out of the possibility of being in this spot where he could come back. Who knows what's going to happen, how this health situation is going to play itself out. The only way to really truly avoid it is to not have him on your roster at all. So everyone can see that. They can see the term remaining on his deal, and they say, okay, you tell us what assets you're attaching to Evander Kane in order for us to relieve you of this problem. It's not for nothing. It's not that he has value. It's that you are stapling assets to Evander Kane to move him. If you're the Oilers and you have limited assets to begin with, the way better play is just to play it. If you're really that concerned, play it conservative. Don't spend the money And then at some point when he's ready to return, get a healthy potential impact Evander Kane into your lineup and then see what happens before potentially addressing it again in the summer.
I do think that's something that's got lost a lot in this Evander Kane situation is like, he can still play and he can still make some kind of impact on this team. Like, obviously you want to spend that $5 million and like, that would be great to have him. And then plus whoever that $5 million player is. But like, Evander Kane can come back and change his team. Like, they just got Trent Frederick yesterday, but like, Evander Kane can score goals. He can also play physical and he can be a dick to play against. And the Oilers kind of need all three of those things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you look at him from a few years back in the playoffs and you're like, this guy was the impact piece that they needed. He was such a big difference maker with the way that he played that part is lost on everyone's hammed up on the cap number, which I understand why, but he could end up being very realistically the Oilers' best trade deadline addition in the end. And so to cut off your nose to spite your face, I don't know that makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, it would be nice to, be clear of the issue, but you're probably also in the long run decreasing your playoff chances, let alone the assets that you would spend in order to make it happen.
Yeah, I would have no interest in attaching an asset to Evander Kane to get rid of him, obviously. But what about some other guys?
And not a little one, by the way. Like, it wouldn't be cheap to move.
Yeah, so like again, they're already so thin in the prospect department. Like most teams would trade a Max Wanner and not think twice. The Oilers trade Max Wanner, and it's like, ooh, he might have been their next best right shot defenseman.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't think they spend a lot of time thinking about Max Wanner.
Fair. Let me just quickly ask you then. There's Arvidsson at $4 million. There's Skinner at 3.5. Like, do you think there's a chance there is some subtraction from this roster? I mean, if you're acquiring a defenseman and you need to make the money work, John Klingberg can go. That's not working.
He could go. Again, who's taking him?
I'm saying if you're trying to get an Alexiak and it's like, okay, we need to play it safe here. Seattle's going to keep a little bit of money. And, hey, you have to take the 1.7 for Klingberg to make us whole this season.
Right. I mean, I can see that. Yep. That's a possibility. When it comes to Arvidsson and Skinner, I mean, these guys have full no trade protection. So unless one of them wants to go play for what's likely to be in a trade partner, a non-playoff team, which I can't imagine would be the case, their best bet or most likely play is to reject anything that would pop up.
You just said, Dan, you mentioned the no movement clauses, and obviously that has been a topic of conversation in Edmonton, just adding fuel to the fire. Can you just tell us how something like that would happen where Arvidsson and Henrique is just like not known until late February that somehow these guys also have no movement clauses? Like, I feel like this is something that isn't happening around the league.
I can't offer any insight into it because I wasn't obviously party to the reporting of it, but that he has one, that it just didn't become known. I think that happens more often than you think. Contract details, particularly ones like that, can be somewhat scarce. In fact, like there's some guys around the league that have performance bonuses that we don't know exactly what those are or how they're hit or how it works. So it's not all that unusual for a no trade or no move to slip through the cracks. I think what is unusual is that the Oilers are now working through a process where at the time when you made the Skinner and Arvidsson deals, you're probably thinking, hey, we got these guys to take less to come here. This is a nice bone to throw them to allow them some measure of security with this deal that we won't be moving them and that they could settle in here. And so now we know that they haven't worked and that it's come back to bite them, but that wasn't obviously the view at the time.
Let's maybe move outside of Edmonton and talk about some other teams here. The LA Kings are pretty high up on your list in terms of teams that could get aggressive in the next day and a bit. They have some cap space. They obviously have a couple of assets they could move as well. As an Oilers guy, I'm still not sitting here all that scared of a round one matchup against the LA Kings. What are the chances they make a move that maybe changes my mind a little bit?
Well, the chances I think are legit, but I'll add this. Given the conversation we just had, why wouldn't you be concerned? I mean, think about every really good team that has, a series of 7 or 8 years in the playoffs. at some point in time, there's an upset. And by the way, through this process, the Oilers have also flirted with Game 7 in these first round matchups. So I think with the way the Oilers have played, I would take nothing for granted, one. And two, what happens if LA goes out and gets a difference maker? I'm going to say this, and you can underline it 7 times. If the Carolina Hurricanes decide to move Mikko Rantanen, I believe the LA Kings will be at the very front of the line in order to try and get him. I think this is a team that, obviously at varying points this year has struggled to score. They defend super well. Their goaltending has been fine. They do have difference makers up front. They're built strong down the middle, but that would be a perfect type fit. And I think the other part of it is they're feeling pressure. This Kings team, if you face the Oilers again for a 4th consecutive year and you lose again, you have nothing to show for it. And yeah, I'm sure that's exactly how the Calgary Flames and the Winnipeg Jets felt in the 80s, just trying to make it out of their division. But also, Rob Blake will have been 8 years into his tenure as GM without a single playoff series win. So I think they understand that this is a moment in time where they need to make and show some progress, and they're feeling it. So can they go out and acquire a game breaker, which might really help in that case? And by the way, if you're the Kings and you say, hey, what if we could get Mikko Rantanen and he's just a pure rental? Maybe you're one of those markets that feels really comfortable in saying, well, if anyone has a good chance to re-up him, we'd have as good as any.
You would totally change the complexion of that forward group. Another team in the Pacific I want to ask you about is Vegas. It seems like the second you kind of go, maybe Vegas won't do anything crazy this year, that's when they go and do something crazy and add someone big. But what could you see the Golden Knights getting up to in the next little bit?
I think they're one of the true wild cards. Like, you can't really ever rule them out from anything, which is probably tough as an Oiler fan. Like, think about how shocking that Hurdle deal was. Like, he wasn't even on our radar as someone that could be traded, not because we don't do any digging, but because the Sharks, he was hurt for so long, and the Sharks didn't seem all that motivated to go out and make something happen. So they felt like he was a really good fit. I still think they could use a little bit more scoring punch on the wing. Doesn't have to be too crazy, but you could cook up some scenarios that also make a lot of sense. What about reuniting Riley Smith with the Golden Knights? I mean, he's worked, it works. Big part of your cup team. He's in New York, he's had money retained, but not from the Golden Knights. So you can reacquire him. And I don't think the cost to acquire him would be exorbitant. They could actually, I believe, take his cap hit in full or close to it, without having to do too much. So they're an interesting team for sure. And I think they're involved in a lot of different stuff down the stretch, but they're a really formidable team. They've got 3 really solid defensemen and star level talent up front between Eichel and Stone that I think is going to make them an incredibly difficult out, and probably, as it stands right now today, should be the odds-on favorite to be representing the Pacific in the Western Conference Final.
Yeah, I mean, they're 4 points up on the Oilers, with a game in hand too. And I think if they started a best of 7, as you said, I don't think the Oilers are favorites in that one. Do you got anything else?
I'm just sad, Frank. This sucks right now. This team is driving me nuts. Everything that's come out this week has sucked. I just hope you can tell me something good before the Friday deadline. Just anything's fine. American League deal, whatever you've got, let us know.
I'll see what I can do. As I say all the time, I don't make the trades. I don't make the news. I just report on it. But look, this is all part of the roller coaster 82 game season. Very rarely does a team just go on cruise control and start to finish, no hiccups, no headaches. And like I said, the turnover from year over year shouldn't be overlooked. It was pretty significant, and I think even more significant than many realized at the time.
Yeah. Just because the chat's doing this, Frank, and listen, I ask you this question all the time, and I asked you it today on DFO Live. You do not make the news, you report it. I love that line. The Oilers are not thinking goalie in their front office, right?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Thanks.
And there's also no goalies on your trade targets board, as well as out of the top.
There's Peter Mrazek and Dan Vladar. Vitek Vanacek is gone now.
Vitek Vanacek, hey?
What could have been?
The one that got away. All right, Frank. Well, we'll let you get back to breaking trades and doing all your deadline stuff. It's a busy couple days for you, so we appreciate you popping on.
See you guys.
There you go.
Frank
Seravalli. What's up, Nation citizens? If you like that video, then you need to be subscribed to the Oilers Nation YouTube. Podcasts, live shows, exclusive interviews, and analysis. Everything you need from your favorite voices at Oilers Nation. And you don't want to miss any of it, so hammer that subscribe button.